All right, hello everybody, and welcome to TGIK. Let's see, I need to change things around so I can read the comments for folks. Yeah, well, welcome. I am Joe Beda. I am a principal engineer at VMware. This TGIK started when we were Heptio. We were acquired late last year. And TGIK is a place where we talk about Kubernetes, what's going on, play with some stuff, and it's all live, no net, playing with stuff fresh. And so if you haven't seen it before, we're on episode 63, which just blows my mind that we have that many of them. I haven't been doing them for a while. Chris has been picking up some of the slack. But we're going to actually, I think next week we're going to have Duffy return and do his second TGIK. So we're trading things off just as a way to make something like this sustainable. All right, so let me say hi to everybody. I love doing this. Let's see. So we have, let's see. Walid was here early, about 15 minutes early. Good to see you again, Olav. Good to see you. Anna. Fragsausen. Tim, good to see you. Let's see. And then we're going to be talking about today, some of the comments here are going to be, if you scroll back, we're going to be talking about Tilt, this local development experience environment being built by this startup called Windmill. I knew some of those folks. They're ex-Google. Lamadi, Sharesh from Hamburg. Good to see you both. Saeed from London. Martin from Rotterdam. Anna from... Oh, she's saying something in a language, I think that's German. It looks German. Martin from the Netherlands. I was just invited, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but if not, maybe Chris is going to do it, to go speak at the VMware users group. And apparently the biggest one in the world is in the Netherlands, so that might be fun. Let's see, Leonardo from Brazil. Obina from California. Oh my goodness, there's just so many here. So let's see. I'm not gonna. Yeah, we got to get moving otherwise. But I'm so great to see everybody. Oh, Minnesota. Okay, so I'll just special call out to those who are dealing with the polar vortex. Yeah, my parents are in Chicago, and it was I don't know, minus 15 Fahrenheit with a wind chill of minus 50. It was colder than the South Pole. So yeah, luckily we didn't have to suffer through that here in Seattle. All right, so let's go ahead and. Go ahead and get started here. Let's see, I'm going to switch to my screen. So the first thing here is we have notes for the episode, and these are on this site called HackMD. And I encourage folks, and George, did you put in the comments, I don't know if you did, a pointer. These will get committed into GitHub. I don't know if we've been sharing these with folks, but yeah, so we can crowdsource folks taking notes. So please feel free if George shares that link to help out here. Yeah. And so first of all, so we're going to be covering Tilt, like I said. You can, if you want to start reading about that while I'm talking, you can go to, where did it go? Here we go. You go to tilt.build is the URL. So you can go ahead and start reading ahead if you like. The image here is these are all sort of stream of consciousness when we pick these images. For me, when I hear Tilt, well, the name of the company is Windmill, so there's obviously a Don Quixote reference with respect to tilting at windmills. But I also think when you're playing pinball, if you bang the machine, it says, hey, you're trying to move the ball around, and it'll go into a tilt mode. So it's just another usage of tilt. So this is a pinball image here. Oh, there's Duffy. Good to see you, Duffy. And so while it's saying that some of them are not on GitHub, yeah, we need to because we do this on Friday, and and sometimes there's other things going on. We're not always as diligent as we need to be in terms of taking the HackMDs and moving those into GitHub. So maybe we'll take an item to actually go ahead and get that done for this and some of the previous ones. So all right. So let's go and do a quick tour of some links here. So the first one is there is the CNCF Technical Oversight Committee. There's elections there, and and I was elected, and I'm honored to be there. Let me give you a little bit of background here. So there's Kubernetes, and Kubernetes has its own governance structure. And the Uber group for Kubernetes is the steering committee. I'm on the steering committee, but like as part of the steering committee, we try and shove as much responsibility to other groups inside the project as we can. So the steering committee is really sort of aims to make itself be something of last resort. But then Kubernetes, the IP is owned by and gets support from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And the Cloud Native Computing Foundation has a mission that goes beyond just Kubernetes, really looking across all of cloud native technology. And the main sort of technical group there is called the TOC, the Technical Oversight Committee. And they're in charge of deciding, which projects get inducted into the TOC, and then helping to make sure that those projects are getting good support and that all kind of makes sense. And so I'm really excited with the set of folks that are coming in. A lot of good people with a lot of passion around sort of making this a vibrant ecosystem. But stay tuned, because you will have noticed that, depending on your definitions of diversity, this is not as diverse a set of people as we'd like. It's all dudes, all men. It tilts towards North America, and it tilts towards folks who are involved with vendors. And so there's going to be ways that we can start addressing this, starting with there's an open position on the TOC that's going to be open in towards the end of February, that's picked by the members of the TOC. And so that's going to be our first chance to expand this group even further. So stay tuned for some of the details around that. All right, so other stuff here, and these links will all be on the HackMD, and we'll put them in the notes and get them onto the GitHub repo. So the next thing here is that Alex Ellis, VMware employee working on OpenFoss, was at GoTo in Copenhagen, and he has a talk here that you can go ahead and watch and get some details there. So it's always nice to give shout out to friends of the community here. Now it's playing. Oh, I think we're getting an ad. Yeah, we're getting an ad. And then Brendan Burns, co-founder at Microsoft, also gave a talk there talking about some of the development-focused projects that Microsoft has been involved in and or has been sponsoring. And so you can go ahead and check that out. Dan, thanks. Yeah. So Dan, by the way, is are you CEO, Dan, or Grand Poobah of Windmill, the folks who are driving the project that we're talking about here? And he's saying, good to see the TOC take this seriously. We didn't have to hear feedback, honestly, for folks to go like, wait a second, but like we definitely heard the feedback from people loud and clear there. So Dan is CTO, and then his co-founder Nick is the CTO. That's the fun part of doing a startup. You get to give yourself a fancy title. Hi, Engin from Istanbul. Nice to see you. Michael's saying I need a Google paid subscription. I do for my personal account, but here I'm logged into my VMware account, and so I don't pay for like YouTube Red on the VMware account. Let's see. And then there's this link from Megan O'Keefe here, and George pulled this one up, which is a bunch of tools for sort of getting started using Kubernetes. This is tilted towards the Mac, which I think is really interesting because I think there's a lot of folks who are like, how do I even, get going with this? So a lot of really cool stuff going on there. Here's an interesting article from, talking about Kubernetes Secrets. Points out to some things such as sealed secrets and introduces this new project called Camus. I haven't looked at this one in detail, but I think it might be fun to do a TGIK where we look at secrets, we go in depth, look at sealed secrets, look at some of the different options, different ways to encrypt and manage this stuff. One of the things that, and I haven't looked at this in a detailed way, but I have a question because I think it uses the service account secret to be able to decrypt things, and I'm wondering how that, I don't know. I'm interested in that because like we're moving to a world where the service account secret is either not, maybe changed and rotated. So there's some efforts going on there. So that looks really interesting. And then finally, the front page for Kubernetes Docs is expanded and reorganized to really, I mean, there's a ton of content here, and I think in some ways there's too much content. And so there's been a lot of effort from SIG Docs to make sure that folks can find the right content at the right time so that they can go ahead and get started. All right, so that's what's going on around the Kubernetes ecosystem. 1.14 is starting to shape up. We've entered a point where new features coming in at this point need a exception process, and so we're and then as part of this, we're trying hard to move everything towards KEPs, Kubernetes enhancement proposals, so that we get a clean view on all the stuff coming in. So that's exciting. Yeah, any last questions before we move on to starting to look at Tilt? Anybody? I got to give a second for you all to hear me and then be able to type. Oh, apparently someone has filed an issue for us to look at Camus, so that'd be cool. Yeah. All right. So let me go ahead and get started. So first of all, to begin with, I am running a Kubernetes cluster on AWS. This is the Heptio Quick Start. And kube control. Maybe if I can see my version, you can see I have, let's see, so I'm running a 1.13 kube control and the server is running 1.11. We should probably pretty soon update the quick start there. Get nodes. And you can see we have a master node plus a couple of compute nodes. Yeah. Oh, and people are giving me grief about not drinking Rainier. And the reality is that I'm not drinking a lot of beer yet. And like Chris, last TGIK wanted some Bud Light. And so I bought a 6-pack and, we're still working on it. So you can tell we're really drinking a lot of beer around here. Oh, and then Chuck is saying that the PR is merged to update to 1.13. So that's great. Okay, so that'll get propagated soon. So the quick start will be updated. Thanks for doing that, Chuck. All right, so that's sort of where we're starting with here, and I like to, as I start looking at projects, to really take a look at this from the point of view of a random user. So I haven't done a lot of time to dig into Tilt already, So I'm going to start with the page. I'm going to go through it. I did, talk with Dan and the folks at Windmill. So he's here. If I get totally stuck, then I'll be able to have him bail me out. But hopefully, we can maybe dig out some extra details with Dan, but we won't get stuck by going through the READMEs and the sort of getting started experience. And yeah, all right. So there's a demo here that goes through it, and looking at the demo, it looks like it's deploying stuff and doing updates, so it feels like maybe it's a little bit like Scaffold. So I'm looking at that. I think the idea here, and I think we did a series of these before, which is like I'm developing on my laptop or on my workstation, and I have a bunch of stuff running in Kubernetes that I may want to call out to, and how do I make sure that I create an integrated experience between my desktop and what's running in my cluster. And so let's see. So here we're talking edit with your ID, save to your file system, no commit or push, just magically things happen. So in some ways similar to Scaffold. So, and I haven't looked at Scaffold in a while, and I know that they've done some updates. So we'll be able to compare and contrast, or maybe there's reusing some stuff under the scenes. So that'll be interesting. Stop playing kube control with 20 questions with kube control. So it's like giving you an integrated view, and then share your workflow. So there's this tilt up that you can actually use to be able to replicate things to other developers. So that seems to be the 3 points, the 3 things. I know that Dan and the team had like, what are the 3 things we want to push on the website? So there we go. All right, so you get tilt, and that just redirects us to the repo here, and talking about what's going on. So it's Docker build and kube control apply, or Docker compose up type of thing going on. All right, let's see. And so we have the complete user's guide. So let's go ahead and hit that. And we also have an installation guide. Okay, this is in the user's guide. Okay, so Let's see, do I have Docker running? I don't know if I have Docker running. Let's see, is it hidden someplace? Yes, I have Docker running already. So let's see. Oh, and it says in the Docker for Mac preferences, click Enable Kubernetes and verify that it works. Well, we're not going to do that because I actually have a cluster running in AWS that I'm working with. And then I can go through and we can go ahead and install. We can install it here. Okay. Realizing that our sample is set up for local dev, and so there may be a bit of search replace in image names to get our sample project working with your AWS cluster. Okay, so we'll go through that, Dan, and we'll figure that stuff out. Hopefully, like I think, one of the things that's worth talking about is like when do you want to develop against Minikube versus when do you want to develop against a real cluster? And I think that might be something that we can go through. I always like to, Minikube is great, or the Docker, Kubernetes support is great. But I think, my general belief here is that every change between dev, staging, and production will eventually lead to an outage. So that's one reason why I think folks may want to actually work with a real cluster. But that's definitely a point that we'll go ahead and we'll get to. And I will keep my eye out for where we have problems. And we can always revert to using Minikube or the built-in stuff if we need to. All right. Oh, and it's going to installing Windmill dependencies on installing Docker. Okay, I did not install Docker via Homebrew. I installed it separately, so I wonder what's going to happen here. So it says the formula built, but it's not symlinked. Okay, couldn't do that because it's already there, but which Docker there? Okay. If I do, where'd my windows go? There we go. Okay. User local bin Docker. Yeah, so this is pointing into the Docker app, so that's slightly different there. So, okay. Okay, option B is to download the tilt binary. It's one binary. Yeah, so that, it always seems easy. Like, hey, we'll just like download the binary here and it'll be fine. But like, it always ends up being a little bit more complicated than you think because you have to. Okay, yeah, you guys have it in a tar file. All right, so cool. So we should be good now. I think tilt. Send anonymized usage data to Windmill. I'm going to say yes here. Thank you for asking versus just opting in like some other companies do. I'm not going to mention names, but you know who you are. All right. Let's see. Okay. So there's analytics, so there's info about that. So I really like that y'all are making that be a first-class thing, the whole analytics stuff. So tilt version, we'll go ahead. Oh, look, I'm on version 7, and it says 6 here. Hopefully that means things are upgrading fast. Built 2019. Oh, that was built. Okay. So so version 7 is fresh as today. So there we go. All right, so we're good to go there. Let's go through and let's see. So there's the tilt channel in the Kubernetes Slack. Start by seeding into a project you can already build and deploy to Kubernetes, and then there's this tilt file thing. Okay, so the next question is, do we want a sample application to actually go ahead and start with here? Because I want to go ahead and do that. So there's comparing to Scaffold. And, oh, is this like comparing to Scaffold and Helm? So we'll go through that. There's looks like a lot of good stuff here. So tilt file concepts, so there's good stuff there. Okay, so example projects. And so it looks like there's 2 example projects. One of these is called OneUp, is a simple app that starts one service. So that might be a good place to start. And then there's this Cervantes, which is a personalized homepage app. So we can go ahead and do that. Do we want to do, should we start with the simple one or the more complex one? What do y'all think? Simple one or more complex? Let's do the simple one to start with. Oh, this one is actually in the tilt repo, whereas this one's separate. Well, let's start with the one in the tilt repo. So here we go. 063, I'm going to go there. Git clone. Let's see. Complex. Everybody's saying start with the complex one. All right. Well, as this is cloning, I'll go ahead and look at this. All right. And Aaron's asking about could we look at Tilt's Helm integration today if possible? Yeah, we'll have to see if we can go ahead and get there to see how it integrates with Helm or compare and contrast. Cool. All right. So here we are. We have, okay, so the first thing is if we look here, there's a tilt file and a tiltfile.dc, and there's also a Docker Compose and Scaffold. So we got a lot going on here. We have tilt file. What does DC do? Oh, Docker Compose. Okay, so I'm, all right. We're gonna open VS Code here. Maybe it's coming up. And we can look at the tilt file. Okay. And let's see, this thing is Python-ish. All right, cool. So that's interesting. All right, and so theoretically, there we go. And let me make this bigger so that everybody can see it. So theoretically, let's see, so this tilt file contains one composite service which depends on a number of regular services. Here's a quick rundown. So the front end is in Go, presents a grid of results calling the other services. We have Vigoda in Go, Snack in Go, uses static build, Doggos, Go with a JS component, Fortune, which uses Go and protobufs. Hypothesizer is Python, does a pip install for package dependencies, reinstalls dependencies only if the dependencies have changed, and Spoonerisms is in JavaScript using Yarn, does a Yarn install, and all that. So, okay, so this is really interesting because we have a bunch of different, like, interesting ways for how all this stuff works. And then a tilt file is a, if I'm reading this right, it is a, now we'll go through and we'll look at the first 15 minutes. A tilt file is a, let's see, it uses StarLark. So this is a subset of Python that's used in the Bazel build system. It's interesting, there's history here, and there's a lot of ins and outs, and some of this is, it's fascinating when you look at it from the point of view of Google. And let me give you a little bit of inside baseball history here. So at Google with Borg, which was, obviously the system that Kubernetes was inspired by, the language that you wrote your deploy scripts or your deploy descriptions for Borg was not YAML. It was this thing called Borg config, Borg config language, BCL, which got generalized into GCL, Google config language. And that was never released outside of Google. And it has fans and it has detractors. But JSON, which I'm a fan of, but it's also very polarizing, borrows a lot of ideas from BCL and GCL. Meanwhile, there were folks inside of Google that's like, I hate BCL so much, or at least it doesn't work for us, that I'm going to go off and do something else. And so this is namely the Gmail folks that went off and built a Python language for being able to configure Borg. Meanwhile, the build system inside of Google used all these build files that were written in a Python dialog also. And those things found their way into, as that build system got open sourced as Bazel, that dialect or subdialect of Python found its way out. And that's what StarLark is. And I haven't looked at this stuff closely in a long time, so hopefully I'm doing this justice. And as we look to use StarLark to deploy Kubernetes stuff, we're coming full circle, and this is not exactly comparable to the Python-based Borg stuff, but in some ways it hints at sort of some symmetry there. And so I think more than anything else, this actually really drives home the point that there are a gazillion ways to skin this particular cat, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. All right, so let's go ahead and what do I need to do to get started? I just want to like do tilt up and see if I can make this work. Okay, so one of the things that we're seeing here is that most services we do Docker builds. So this will do a Docker build here, but then will it go through and push it so that I can actually download it? How does that work with the public cluster? Tilt will just Docker push when it builds, so you'll need to go and, okay, go ahead and do that stuff. But I assume, since this is like image repo equals, and I can just do something like that and make that work, right? Docker push when it builds, so you'll need to go and do all that. Okay, so it will do a Docker push. Okay, so but if I had done this, Dan, without doing this, even if I was running on let's say like the Docker Kubernetes stuff or Minikube, if I'm using the Docker in Minikube, it would then build it. The push would fail for permissions, but then it would probably just mostly work anyways. That's what I'm guessing happens. Or maybe it recognizes that you're running one of those local things and doesn't bother push. And we also have to change the YAML. Okay. Yeah, so I think this is interesting because like I think what you're going to find is that, especially if you want to take a tilt file and then share it between multiple developers, there's going to be cases where everybody is using their own repo, and then there's going to be cases where they're using dedicated repos per developer. So that's, okay, so tilt skips the push for Minikube. So yeah, it has magic to know that it's talking to Minikube then and skips the push. All right, so what we're going to do here, and I just switched things up. So the service that we're looking for here, if I can figure this out, is we want to use the Amazon image thing, which is part of the EKS tab here. And like they make this thing really hard, but we can go through and we can do that. Do I hit save or close here? Boom. I go to EKS, and here's ECR. I see repositories. We have no repositories. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is that with Amazon, you have to, let's see if we can make this stuff working, because I haven't done this in a while. So we're going to repo is, we're going to create one called Vigoda. We have to create a repository for each of these things, which is a real pain in the butt. So I'm just going to go through and do this. So most repositories outside of Amazon, the first time you push an image, it'll automatically create the repository on demand. Amazon, though, is different in that it expects you to have these things pre-created. You can probably use one repo for all. I don't think you can because, like, I guess we could use one repo with different, these are, what is the so this is part of like Docker build. I don't know what this is here. Is this the label? Is that the label, I think? And then we have front end, which is another one that we're creating. And then you have no group. Yeah, I mean, I probably, let's see, and then we have Fortune. So we got a lot of images that we're building. So this is going to be interesting. This is what happens when we start with the hard one. And spoonerisms. Okay. So I'm not looking at the tilt file. Oh, there's the list. Okay. I'm not looking at it in detail. We'll go ahead and get there, I'm sure. You can with Docker Hub, but I don't think you can with ECR, with grouping and stuff. Okay. So there we go. We got all of those running. And so what we have here is we have the base is this. Base equals this. And then we're just going to go through and we're going to do image base like that, right? And so now, oh man, what is we can do that, and boom, image base base plus, and I think, did you see that? That was some impressive VS Code knowing all the tricks. Did you see what I did there? This was actually really cool. It's one of the best things in VS Code is what I did is I did a search for the particular string that I want to replace, and then it's Command-Shift-L, which says create a cursor on each of these things. I screwed it up now because I can't do it again. So you do this, Command-Shift-L, which does all these things. I then delete it, and then I do image, base, plus, and then that. Okay, and then this first one got screwed up. Okay, so I think we're good to go there. So Aaron says, do people typically just push these dev images to Docker Hub, or is it more common to use a local registry of some kind? That's a really good question. I think one of the things that I wish we had done with Kubernetes is made it easier to associate, hey, here's the preferred image repos or image registry that you can go ahead and use for this, with maybe a way to override this on a per namespace basis. Because I think that is, oftentimes you want those things to maybe be tied together. So I think in terms of like image management, pushing, replicating, there's a ton of work that can be done. And right now these things are actually probably more disconnected than we want them to be. So I think you can either have something local running in cluster, but doing that and managing that is another thing you have to manage. Or you can use a hosted registry like ECR. And I think there is no one size fits all anywhere. Okay, so no, it should be fixed now, Duffy. I think we're good. All right, so we got that. And then let's see, we also have to update the YAML here. And so this is one of those things when you compare this to something like Compose. Compose does have some capabilities for, I don't know if you could do this type of thing with Compose, because you either have to do these like Delta overlays, or there's certain things that it knows how to go ahead and update, but I'm not sure if sort of the image base is one of the things that it supports. So here we go, and we can go through and, oh no, we don't want that one. I want to grab, and where did it go? Deploy. We got that, and we're just going to go ahead and power through here. And there's only, if there's any of these that have more than one image, let me know. Doesn't look like it, but. Oh, echo. Oh, so that is a job that says, oh, it does echo high. So we'll have to see, maybe that comes in someplace. We have secrets. We have sleeper. What does sleeper do? Snack. Well, sleeper wasn't one of the ones that we created, so was it? Was sleep one of the ones we created? Yes. Okay. Spoonerisms. And Vagoda. And then word. All right. This bit felt like friction to me. I do wish Tilt would manage this for you. And maybe there's a way to do that with the Tilt file. Because you could see, like, it's easy enough to parameterize this in the Tilt file itself. And I'm wondering if there's a way to actually apply overlays or modifications into the YAML. Because we're going through add ports, we're adding, so here we're going Kate's resource, name, port forward. So this goes through, okay, we'll have to dig into what that actually does. And here's the Kate's YAML, which does M4. Okay, so we're doing M4 into YAML. M4 YAML calls M4, which is okay, so we could have gone through and actually done some of that with M4. Okay, so those who don't know, M4 is like a generic preprocessor. Not the M4 Carbine. It's a GNU thing, I'm assuming. Yeah, GNU M4. It's essentially like like the C++ pound define type of thing going on here. So this is the fascinating sort of like the transition as people manage YAML. They have YAML and then they're like, hey, I need to like swap some stuff in there. And so let me go through and start using awk or sed or M4. And then as you move past that, then you start looking at something like Helm or JSON or Customize to some degree, but Customize doesn't do everything there. Yeah, cool. All right, so I think we should be going. Oh, the last thing we need to do is, if I'm thinking correctly, is if I go here, there's some magic voodoo for push commands. Retrieve the login commands here. And if I do that, get login. Login succeeded. So this is a Docker login. This will expire after a while. But then we can go through and we should be able to push this stuff. And because we're running in EC2, I think it's all set up that you should be able to pull stuff directly. All right. So let's do tilt up and see what happens. All right. So we're building these different things. And so it looks like, I'm looking at my CPU, you can't see it, but my CPU is definitely doing stuff here as we're building that. So we're building the front end one. And so it's going to go through and build all these things, then push them. And then Kate's YAML, so I'm wondering, did this already, let's see, so there's a log here. Let's see, and I can go through and it's like a curses thing. Where is the deploy going on? Does Kate's YAML actually know, hey, this image is built in this YAML, and so I need to go ahead and do stuff? So let's open another tab. Actually, let me go through and we'll open another tab that way. Cube control get, I don't know, deploy. Do I have anything there? So this thing is still building. So this is going to take a while to come up. Oh, okay, see, TGIK. This is my script. So this is my fancy script that goes, because we're using CloudFormation, it goes and reads a bunch of stuff from CloudFormation, and now I should be able to get deploy. So we have nothing there yet. Okay, so nothing's been deployed. Oh, I see. So like pod readers and read pods and this stuff, all of this stuff is in the YAML, but it's saying, hey, you haven't actually told me about the images that thing references. So I think that's what's going on. Let's see. Discoverable. Okay, yeah. Yeah, this initial build is going to take a while. All right, well, let's go through. While that's going, and, let's go through and read some documentation, try and learn a little bit here. All right, so there's a bunch of tilt file concepts, which looks interesting. So we can look into that. But let's look, how does this relate to Scaffold? So Scaffold does a lot of the same things, where you have some stuff that you're pushing. It knows how to actually rebuild and push. And so Tilt UI shows you at a glance so you don't see it. So it's like, Scaffold is, it doesn't have the fancy curses UI, which is interesting. As you can dig into the logs and that type of thing. And then Tilt's configuration is StarLark, a subset of Python. This allows simple configs to be shorter and complex. So one of the things I think that's interesting that StarLark is being used here. The thing that I would like to see, and I'd like to know, what Dan and co think, is that Tilt is very much built as a development process and development tool. Can I use these same configs that I'm building for my tilt file and use those for a production config and push also? Because I think what we see is that, and I think there's a mirror here with, like, the Node JavaScript world, where you have one config file and then you have different profiles of this, whether you're doing a local or a production build, and you can actually deploy stuff. And I think in some ways these things get really confused and sort of mixed together. But I think also one of the things I do like about Scaffold is that you're able to, I believe, actually have the thing that pushes the deploys be driven by Scaffold but not integrated into Scaffold, so that you can actually use that deploy push and sort of GitOps workflow without having to bring in all your development voodoo. And so that's something that I'd really be looking at here. That is something I like about Scaffold, is that I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it's factored in that way. So the StarLark and push stuff in the evaluation, is that separable outside of Tilt, I guess is the question. And Dan says, we change our mind on that every couple of days, like your ID versus your production world, different trade-offs, but also having them be separate requires duplication and causes bugs. Yeah, so I think, having the config problem of how do I describe my configuration versus how do I do a really fast development flow, those seem like related but separate problems to me. And especially as we look at sort of the GitOps types of things, as we look at CI/CD pipelines, are there a way that we can create a connected world here? So you can run tilt up, HUD false, watch equals false, do the same workflow, but just once. So that's interesting. So you could do that in your CI system. But integrating that with something like WeFlux would be interesting. And yeah, so it's worth exploring that. I think, also looking at other more complex systems that borrow some ideas, or at least are sort of cousins to this, like Pulumi for configuring. We haven't done a TGI on Pulumi. Uses I think lots of languages, but primarily JavaScript in a way that's similar to the tilt file, but then also can manage a bunch of other resources. Like we could have used Pulumi to create those repositories in ECR for us. All right, so let's switch back and see how this thing's doing. All right, so we've built everything, and we're moving our way down, so it's doing its thing. Okay, and so Doggos, like we got a heartbeat on Doggos, so it's now up and running. So these things have actually been deployed and running. We'll give this a, let's see, we can do a watch. Yeah, so we got those things up and running. Oh, this is interesting also. So it automatically goes through and using that M4 takes my username and composites that into the name of the resources. So that means that if you have multiple developers that are sharing the same namespace, they're not stepping on each other. And so I assume you could use M4 to also push this into different namespaces also, because all this stuff is happening in the default namespace. All right, let's go. Okay, so that's compared to Scaffold, and then there's a way to actually go ahead and convert this into the tilt file. And then Helm. Okay, tilt supports Helm out of the box. The Helm function runs Helm template on a chart directory and returns the generated YAML. Okay, so further customization. So this is really interesting. What we're starting to see here. So it looks like config will soon move towards a Turing complete language. It always does. This is the cycle, where you start off with something simple, and then you add more capabilities as you understand it, and then all of a sudden it's a Turing complete language, and you're like, holy moly, this is too complex. Let me simplify it, and then you start all over again. So that's the config cycle, and I think Gareth, who was at Puppet, now at Docker, I think has a talk that he delivers on this. I believe he's been talking about this for a while. All right, so what's interesting, what we're seeing with Helm is that with Helm 2, there's Helm, which is, and then there's Tiller, which is the server-side component. And we're seeing a lot of folks move away from Helm with Tiller towards just using Helm client-side with Helm template, which I think is kind of interesting because Tiller comes with a bunch of security considerations that are really complicated. Whereas it's hard to run Tiller in a super secure way. Whereas Helm template is essentially reusing the Go templating language, plus loading some values from YAML and pulling those things together. So we're seeing a lot of use of Helm template. So it looks like Tilt doesn't support full Helm, as in like Helm plus Tiller, but it does support Helm template. So instead of using M4 to do your templating of your YAML, you're actually using something like Helm to do that templating. So that seems to be what's going on here with respect to Helm. So it's a relatively narrow Helm integration. Now, as we look forward to Helm 3, and I haven't checked the progress lately, um, the plan of record for Helm 3 is to move almost everything to be client side. Um, and then, out of left field, Helm is also looking to integrate Lua, which I think is an interesting choice, right? So now, as people look to do config, it's like, well, we can do JavaScript, we can do Python, right? So JavaScript would be like, say, the Pulumi type of solution. Also, if you look at something like Brigade, which isn't exactly apples to apples, but like it also uses JavaScript. We have Tilt using Python. We have JSON, which is a turn-complete language in and of itself. That can be used for these things. And then I think with Helm, folks are looking at using Lua also. So it's kind of interesting that like a lot of folks are mixing this stuff in here. All right. So and then Docker Compose. Let's see. So there's a way you can do Docker Compose, and I'm assuming what it does is actually take the Docker Compose file and sort of generate some like YAML on the fly that it then goes ahead and pushes. Does this also, is this just for deployment, or does it also pick up the build stuff out of Docker Compose too? I think that might be something that'd be interesting to look at. All right, so then here's some example projects that we're doing, and so let's see where we're at here with this thing building. Okay, so we're building the final thingy. We're almost there. Okay, so it actually uses Docker Compose as a separate orchestration. So it'll then go through and modify the Docker Compose and then call Docker Compose directly to push stuff. Is that right, Ben? So that's interesting. Okay, so totally different sort of deploy engine there. So he says at the top. Tilt can use Docker Compose to orchestrate your service instead of... Oh, interesting. Okay. So it's like a totally parallel sort of versus, using client Go or calling kubeconfig. It just calls Docker Compose, and there might not even be any Kubernetes in the picture, I guess. All right. So this thing's doing its thing. We're creating the container, and we're running. Yes. How do I get to it? How do I run it? So this is up and running. Kube control, get service. We have some services. One of these is a load balancer. All right, usually I look at YAML really carefully, but I think the interesting thing here is in this case, I wasn't looking at the YAML super carefully because it was application YAML, which is not sort of like, it's going to be different for your application versus other people's applications. And there is no YAML for Helm, for Tilt, because it looks like Tilt is completely client-side. So YAML's like, how does Tilt allow you to inject, say, variables into your YAML file? So that's that M4 thing. We can dig into that a little bit. And then Eugene says, I think they're removing Tiller and Tyler in V3. Yeah, so no server-side components. Okay, so now I can go through, and Dan's saying that if I go through here, I can go up and hit B to open it in a browser, and then this automatically launches it into a browser. How does it know to open in the browser? Are you sort of like pulling together, like, hey, all these things are named FE, the service, and then you're just aggregating those into like one thing? Is that the idea? And then this is doing... this is a kube control proxy wrapper. Okay, so I can go through and expand, and it says, well, there's a pod here. But what about, does this also show me the deployment and the other, like, so if I do browser and go to, okay, so that's actually going there. So this is doing, oh, I see. So this is doing a kube control port forward to the actual pod. Okay, gotcha. The Kate's resource call at the end of that port forward. Okay, so let's see what we have down here. So we have add ports, local ports starting at 9,000. So we're doing all of this. Kate's resource name, port forwards equals port. I want to dig into what's actually going on there. Loop use. Okay, so I'm thinking about how do I want to dig in here. So we can go back here and we can go custom commands, build, resources. No, those are execution. Okay, so tilt UI makes it easier to find errors by grouping related status and output. When you edit a file, you want to know what error it caused. Tilt calls these groupings resources. Each resource has a line in the UI. So tilt generates these groups after executing your tilt file. We're actively working on how to group. Okay, so you try and figure out a grouping so you can show it all come together. You can configure a resource with a call to Kate's resource here. So this actually says, okay, the Kate's resource, we have a resource named FE, and so essentially everything called FE will show up in that line. Is that the idea? Yeah, so we'll add a feature. We'll play with it and see how it works. Okay, you can configure a resource with a call to Kate's resource. Today, only the relevant configuration to the argument is port forward. So this helps do port forwards into this. So port forwards for a particular port. So we're doing port forward 9000 into this. And then what is it forward to? If I look at the deploy for, like, say, doggos, it just says, hey, there's a container port there. Let me go ahead and actually configure a port forward from local. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of what's going on. Cube control get deploy. Cube control get deploy. J beta doggos output equals YAML. So we're going to look at this. So how did it sort of go ahead and muck this when I did that stuff? That's what I'm wondering. So it went through here and, okay, so it went through and it actually went through and modified some stuff, because here we have host path to the Docker socket for tilt Docker socket. Okay, so this is a little bit weird. I'm wondering what's going on here. Dan, why does, like, this is not a good thing. And it's not a good thing because I think, depending on your cluster, you may not actually allow users to actually have access to the Docker socket behind the scenes. And I think in general, you may not be running Docker, right? There is, we're starting to see a lot of folks use Containerd or Cryo or other methods for actually running stuff. And so this will totally break here. So I'm wondering why we actually need that. And so you're saying, okay, so we inject a sidecar to update quickly. So this is, I'm digging into the details here. Oh, let me go ahead and grab that link. I think this only applies to the fast build services. Okay. Okay, so this goes into a lot of detail of how this stuff works. Edit foo. And so this is actually doing an incremental build on the server to be able to actually go ahead and do this stuff. And then it's relaunching the pod still, so you're not updating inside the pod then. All right, incremental deploy. Oh, there's a synclet then. All right, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, I'm going to have to dig into that. I don't think we're going to have time to get to the total. So I think it'd be interesting, like this for me, I see something like this and this has me raise eyebrows. So understanding like that, hey, this won't work everywhere. So there's going to be some strategies that work better in some places than others. Oh yeah, George is middle of the country / East Coast-ish, and so has kid duty. So thank you so much, George, for helping out. I really appreciate that. So the port forward is all client side. The fast build is the pro case. So, okay, recommend the readme.md for a more vanilla flow. Okay, so I am sorry, I am jumping all over the place on y'all here, but okay. So here, were you talking the readme in the example app here, or the readme in the tilt repo? Okay, but anyways, okay, so let's go through. We have something up and running. And we see here that it didn't change container ports. That means that when I actually go through and in the tilt file, when we do add ports here with the Kate's resource, this is all client side. So this is just configuration that sets up the port forward to the node. I wish there was a way I could dump that configuration here in here to actually see, because like like where does this 9,000 show up? Because it's not showing up in our, oh, I see, it's showing up local. I see. So when I expand this, I can do this. And so I either hit B here, or I can go through and and, you know, go to 9001. Ava Goda is still dead as of 10 a.m. Yes, okay. So we got it there. The README in the 70s. Okay. All right, so there we go. We're up. Hit B to open the server. The server's front end will actually get something like this. If you're exploring Tilt via serventes, here are some things you can do to see. Okay. The snack service is easy to edit. Open the snack.main.go and find constant strings, and let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So we have here snack. Get ready for your next snack. Green tea mochi, Pocky sticks. Oh man, this sounds good. I'm doing low carb except for that beer. So now I should be able to go through and I have snack. And we look at main.go. Here's the snacks that we have. And we're going to, let's see, we're going to replace all this with keto snacks. All right, so we're going to do sausage. You know, eggs, hard-boiled eggs, Baby Bell cheese, string cheese. All right, do we have more keto snacks? Anybody have any ideas? This is what's on my mind these days. Oh, here we go. Pork rinds. How do you spell rinds? It's not like that. Rinds. Chicharrones. Chicharrones. Okay, yeah. Costco now has these, at least our Costco does, has these chicharrones that are amazing. Okay, so I did that. I hit save. Now, theoretically, magically, oh, it's mad. What did I do wrong? Oh, come at the end, because that's go. Okay, so now it's going through, and we see we're rebuilding here. And we're successful, and it's redeploying. And now string cheese, sausage, hard-boiled eggs, we're all keto. Awesome. Almonds? Yeah, almonds is good. A lot of fiber there. All right, so let's go through, and if I have almonds, I hit save here, and it's automatically, so it is doing a rebuild and a repush. Is that doing that build locally, or is it doing the build in the cluster? Do you know, Dan? Because I think one of the things I think to keep in mind also is that I may only give my cluster permission to pull from the repo and not push to the repo. So the cluster may not always have repo push capabilities, which is something to keep in mind. Okay, so here for Docker build, it does the build locally. Fast build, it's doing it in cluster. Okay, vodka and soda water, yes, exactly. So here the build is local. Okay, so that makes sense. So that's up and working. There we go. We got almonds now. All almonds all the time, apparently. There we go. All right, so we are up and running. Sweet. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and, and I just realized that even though we're hitting this with localhost, it's set up with a service type equals load balancer. I flashed on the screen earlier, so folks can go ahead and, like, randos can go ahead and hit this also. So something to be careful of if you're going through this. All right, so let's go back to the README and check out to see what we got here. Okay, so TiltUX is built to highlight active problems no matter where they're happening. Let's go type in. So we already saw what happens when I have a typo, and then there's a startup error. Crash loop backup. So you can go ahead and interactive on. Okay, Tilt onboarding is nifty because you can do it interactively. Instead of writing your config first, then run Tilt, Tilt watches your config and updates itself as you reconfigure. You can recreate this experience by resetting to a pre-Tilt state and then adding it back in. So stop Tilt. Okay, so we do Tilt down, which will go ahead and pull all this stuff down. Deleting via kube control. Open a Tilt file, and we'll go through and we're going to comment it all out. or we'll just go ahead and I have it in my paste buffer, don't worry. Tilt up with an empty file, and it says no resources found. You don't have anything. And then it says now I can add everything back. And it is order dependent when you add stuff to the tilt file because it is a program. So I go ahead and I do that. And now all of a sudden it's going through and it's building and creating all this stuff. It's faster now because everything's cached on my local machine, so we're good to go. So, oh, thank you, Anna. All right, so we are up and running. All right, and then fast build. Tilt can update Kubernetes in seconds, not minutes, by using fast build. Because Servantes is a demo app, most services are small enough that they don't need this optimization. We purposely built for our front end to have a slow build. It links in the Kubernetes client library, which can take minutes to build. Servantes uses fast build for the front end to demo Tilt's speed at updating running services. In FE main.go, change a constant like max widgets to display fewer, and then it updates that in seconds. So let's see if that actually works here. Okay, so if we look in stack.main.go, okay, so we can update it in different ways. So okay, so let's try, we'll play with that with snacks. So if we look at main.go, okay, so we can do this where we do a log fatal. So now the thing will build, but it'll actually fail to launch. So, all right, sweet. Okay. Oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so here's what's going on is that it's in a crash loop back off, or and so it's highlighting that in red, and then it's actually pulling the errors out also. Is this looking at standard error and just finding a line, or is that what's going on, or is it looking at sort of the last standard error line? I'm wondering how you do this, but this is really nice because it helps you to get into this and see what's going on. And then I can go through and, okay, and there's a log here. Now, is this the general, when I hit enter here to actually get into a log, this is a log of what's going on for sort of rebuilding and deploying. But I'm also wondering, can I look at sort of the full debug logs here? Yeah. So yeah, so I'm wondering if I can actually, like, I was expecting to sort of see like full debug logs and not just the error log, or maybe that is just the error log. I wonder if we go through and do Q. Logs, deploy. Okay, oh, and we have to actually specify. So this is one of those things that's interesting is that when you do a kube control logs, when you inject a sidecar, okay, so the heartbeat stuff is showing up here. Okay, so when I go through, so there is a heartbeat going on there. When I go through and look at logs here, I'm only seeing the error logs. I'm not actually seeing the real logs. So this is the tilt log, not the actual logs coming from the pods. There are full logs. The service words has more verbose, and then Vagoda has the heartbeat that scrolls. Okay, so yeah, I'm just wondering. You said Vagoda has. Okay, so this says server status, but that's actually, I assume, it's just grabbing standard error. Probably just standard error. Yeah. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong service. Ha! That's right. So I was looking at. No wonder why I was confused. Okay, I was looking at doggos. So if I go down in doggos and I look at that, now I see heartbeat. Okay. And I can go through. And if I scroll up here. Okay. Yeah, so I would say like looking at the. Okay, so this is just those logs. Okay, cool. All right, so it's like got an integrated log viewer there. And we're in crash loop backup here. So we'll go through and say, we'll comment that out again. And then, so we'll get that up and running. It'll go ahead and rebuild and push. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . we're up and running. And now I can go through here and I can do an error on a request. We'll see how that works. Where am I? Yeah. All right, see, so now that's great, but now like we have, oh, we didn't send any data, and now we see one restart here. So we can actually say like, oh, that's not good. And then I wonder why, this is fascinating. So it only says one restart. How come we're not seeing multiple restarts? Now it's running. Okay, so we're seeing 2 restarts. And so it's kind of in an error crash loop back off-y type of thing going on here. Okay, cool. And then we can go ahead and say, oops, and fix that, and then it'll find its way through. Oops. Oh, it says, so something happened here. It said connection refused. All right, so is there a key to actually sort of, I tried Control L that essentially says repaint the screen. Shift R, okay, Shift R. There we go, boom. All right. Sweet. Okay. So now how does it know which files to watch when you're editing stuff? Do you actually go through, I'm gonna look at the tilt file again, because it looks like you're just saying, well, here's the YAML, here's the image base, and we're doing Docker build. So Docker build, this much go through and actually parse the Docker file and find out which files we're actually going through and referencing from the Docker file. That's what I'm assuming it's actually doing there, which is kind of interesting, because if we look at the Docker file, we're adding everything from that directory, and so it actually figures that stuff out. That's what I'm assuming is going on here. Now, okay, here, let's try something. All right, I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Dan. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do that, and then we're going to do from scratch, or we'll do Alpine. And then we're going to do copy from equals build, go bin snack to root, and then so I went ahead and saved that. So I moved this to a multi-stage build. All right, let's see what's going on. It's rebuilding. Theoretically, this should all just work fine. Oh, I have to go through and change snack.yaml because now we're actually, I put this at the root. Wow, so this is actually really cool because like a lot of times there's certain files that if you're exec user process caused, no such files, so I'm still screwing something up there. So /snack, okay, now let me look at my Docker file here. Copy to snack, maybe that's it. Because a lot of times like there's certain files, well, if you touch this file, you're gonna have to Control C out, but it looks like Tilt is really built to make sure that it can handle any change, even changes to itself, which I think is really, really interesting. All right, I still screwed something up. What did I screw up here? So from go bin snack. All right, well, shoot, what did I mess up? I'm confused here. So now, okay, so now how would I go ahead and debug this? What would I do? I could launch this thing locally, right? And then actually sort of see what's going on and see what I'm screwing up. All right, so so the template files and the YAMLs. Is there a template? Oh, the template direct? No, that, oh yeah, so that's what, oh, ha, there you go. So it is actually going ahead and missing that. And so now I need to like, we're gonna go through and we're gonna like rename this to be /templates. Oh, let me grab this whole thing. And then in our Docker file, we're going to have to do copy from build. Actually, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through and let's see, web templates. Does that work as a recursive copy? So let's see if we got that working. Like I said, I'm kind of off the reservation here, or off the rails. Sorry. So it's saying no such. No. So we built, but we're still having a problem here. So this is /templates. Oh, and then we probably need to tell main.go, where is it actually looking for the templates? Template path. Template dir, that's getting set in there. All right, I'm sure there's a way to make this work, but I am messing it up. So that's got to be it. So there's that, boom, /templates. And then if I look at the Docker file, like, okay, now I have to look at like Docker file copy directory. Copy versus add. I'm always confused by this. No, like, that should work. I'd expect that to work. Maybe that's it. We'll try that. We're still doing it. Okay. I'm sure there's a way to get through this. What I would do next is, okay, let's actually try and fix this. So what I'm going to do, just because I think it's useful for, I don't want to get myself stuck without getting myself unstuck. So I'm going to go into servanties. I'm going to go into, this was snack, and we're going to do a Docker build here. So we'll just do this out of band. Okay, so Duffy's suggesting I set the command to sleep and exec in. So that's definitely one thing that we can do here. But we're on Alpine, so... Okay, so we'll go to snack, and we'll comment this out in command sleep 600. Maybe that'll work. And so now if I go back here, this thing should be up and running. All right, and there's the pod. And then I should be able to do kube control exec ash. Defaulting container name to snack. I'm trying to call ash. So we're not connecting here. Oh, I need to do, sorry, exec-ti. Okay, so there's snack, cd templates, index.tpl. Yeah, so there we go. So that should be working. So snack and templates. So there's something else going on here. Snack not found. How come that's not working? I'm so confused. Okay, so now I have the Docker. All right, so we went and we built it. And when we built it, it got, there we go, Docker /snack not found. Did I? I hit the wrong key. Oh, my Mac is now all messed up. There we go. All right, so Docker run dash ti. Huh. Maybe it's not built statically or something. You don't have the standard glibc or something. All right, you know what? We're going to set this stuff aside, right? Okay, let's just go in and we're going to exec one more time here. Snack here. Not found. It's weird. I'm so confused. Maybe it can't exec stuff at the root of the thing or something. We have an open bug around multi-stage builds. This might be, I don't think that's it. I think it's some configuration that I have. Okay, so, but the cool thing out of that, just to call attention to it, is that I modified the Docker file, I modified the YAML, and like Tilt kept doing all the right stuff along the way there. So there's something like with like my Docker file that I created sort of, out of nowhere. So we're just gonna like undo a bunch of stuff and go back to where we were and ignore this for now. I think this was my error, not necessarily a error with Tilt. But it'd be an interesting demo to add to that also. Okay, so now I undid all my work, and theoretically it should build and push, and we're all good to go. All right, now we're up and running. There we go. We're going to have some pork rinds. All right, sweet. Move off Alpine. Yeah, it may be that it's Alpine's the problem. Well, I don't want to get too distracted by that. Let's see if we can explore one more thing while we're here. So Tilt can update Kubernetes in seconds, not minutes, with fast build. So I want to go through and play with fast build a little bit. So Aaron's asking, would Tilt be able to integrate with something using a tool other than Docker files to build a Docker image like Scala project using SBT native? Yeah, I think that would be cool. Like this is one of those things when I look at something like this, is that there's like this default workflow, but in my mind, there's this question of like, how can we mix in other tools that actually bring other strengths? So one of these being deployment, but the other one being a build tool. And then there's other tools that are not like, and I think this comes down to fast build, maybe not so fast, but there's other ways to build Docker images on the cluster without having to sort of reach around and talk to Docker directly. So that's going to be interesting too. So yeah, I think it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how this stuff plays out. Okay, so let's just play with fast build. And so this is the link to the in-depth sort of like, here's how we go through and do all the stuff with the synclet, which I want to read more about that, but I think we're not going to have time to really dig into it. But if we look at Tilt file, one of the things that we have down here is fast build. And so it says, okay, the image base, so that's the name of the image. We have Docker file go base is where that is. Okay, so we have a default Docker file here. And this one's doing a proto-C thing where it has to go and get the proto-C and move it, and then it does a go get on that. So this is sort of a base image. It doesn't actually have an image to execute. And then we're going to add, oh, I see. So this is like the Docker command that we're actually doing. So we're actually building up a derived Docker file here and then run this, and that gives us essentially sort of a derived Docker file here. So fast build, oh, so there's a whole object model behind, like you take the Docker file and you actually turn it into something with an object model is what it looks like. All right, and then fast build is doing some magic. So let's go ahead and let's try it out and see if it works. So if I go to front end here, and I go to main.go, and then, so we'll do max widgets. Where's, oh, this is interesting. All right, so I don't like this, Dan. I'm trying to figure this out. So here we have service spec, and we have service, and then the port that we're actually calling into that port. But does that port get mapped into, like, where does that port come from? So we're not using services. Oh, this is fascinating. So this is actually, this is not, okay, right. So this is essentially creating a bunch of widgets that then have my browser call out to this stuff. And so this is an interesting case where the configuration, so this could be, in this case it's ports, but it could be like a route map that's sitting in an ingress file, is used both in the configuration for Kubernetes, but then also in the configuration for the program itself. And so it's fascinating to me that like these things are very ordered, like this stuff is very order dependent. So if I were to go into my tilt file and go ahead and, where's my tilt file here? And we're gonna actually go through and we're gonna switch Vagoda and snacks. Now these things are going to get out of sync. And I think theoretically, so now this says Vagoda, but it's actually calling snack, and this, well, no. No, Vagoda's not running. I'm confused. I might have really screwed it up. All right, so snack is 9001, Vagoda. Oh, and is it like calling? All right, yeah, so I'm kind of confused on what's going on here now, why this thing is localhost refused to connect. 9001 is now, oh, we're not getting there, which should be snack. Oh, is this because, did I screw something up? Did I not reset my snack YAML? No, command is go snack. All right, so now the question is there a way to like force redeploy? Because I think, all right, we'll quit tilt and restart it and see what happens. All right, this is interesting. When you quit and restart tilt, it has to go through and rebuild anyways because it doesn't know that everything's up to date. So it'd be interesting if tilt could figure out, maybe keep a cache with some hashes to actually make this particular flow faster. All right, now it's working and this stuff got reversed here. So now it's like Vagoda is pointing at snack and snack is pointing at Vagoda because there's sort of duplicate sort of stuff between the tilt file and the front end. I mean, this is like, it's fascinating because this is where like things start out simple and then like config like this starts to spider its way out. So I'm not saying that this is like doing this like the right way. I'm not even sure what the right way here might be. I think it might be something along the lines of, I have like a route map file and I use that route map file to configure both my YAML for maybe like ingress or ingress route with contour, and actually sort of that then becomes an input file to my front end so it actually knows how things are mapped. So like that's an interesting sort of architectural, what is the right way to do something like this? And I think it starts to show that the Kubernetes config and the application config for any complex app starts to really get interesting. Now the other way to do this, and I think this would probably be more typical in a lot of cases, would be that you'd only have one endpoint here. It's like, well, I have my front end, but then I have my API and the browser's calling the API directly. Or there's a lot of cases where your front end is actually calling these things as back-end systems, all sort of inside your cluster using like service-to-service communication, and then compositing that HTML and sending it down. So there's sort of different ways to do this, but this looks like it does like an iframey type of thing going on here. Okay, so now we can go through, where's the max widgets? Max widgets. Okay, we're actually saying that's a lot of widgets. Okay, so we're gonna actually say 3 here. I go ahead, and now this is rebuilding this, and now this should be rebuilding on the other side, and it's up and running. Now, boom, I have 3 widgets. And so in this particular case, all right, thanks for coming, Duffy. In this particular case, it looks like it happened really fast. So I assume that that's using the fast build stuff. So let's go ahead and look behind the curtain here. Kube control, get deploy, JBeta FE. Let's see, output YAML. And here we have the tilt synclet that's getting installed there. It has that path. And so this is the voodoo that fast build is actually inserting there so that it can actually go ahead and patch things live. That's what it's looking like. Yeah, and was it Maya? I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name wrong, is saying that like the Kubernetes client, which is big. So it takes a long time to build this one because you're actually essentially doing, let's look at the sort of the Docker file for this. This thing is going through and doing an apt-get update, proto-C, getting the proto compiler, doing a go get of that. But then also in here, we have vendor, which brings in the client Go. So you're building a whole bunch of stuff there. So this is not only... I'm not sure, like, do you actually... So the thing that's interesting here is that like when you do a Go install, it actually goes through and caches a bunch of the stuff that you're building with client Go. Are you actually breaking this down so that you can actually call go install again? Or like, I'm just wondering sort of how much of the files get saved, or maybe if we look at tilt file, maybe it's like, okay, every time, is the idea that every time you go through and this is the stuff that you can dynamically update, right? So if you do this, it'll say, okay, I'm gonna take that base image and then, or that base running thing, and I'll just like add this stuff again and again. I think that must be what's going on. Okay, yeah, through the magic of fast build, we get to hang on to the Go build cache. Yeah, because the Go build cache, building a incremental rebuild of a Docker image using the Go build cache actually gets really complicated. I just spent last weekend working on Kubernetes up and running, and I rewrote the make file for that. And this would be an interesting thing to try and convert to something like Tilt. But essentially I have a complex make file that builds in Docker containers to try and maintain the Go build cache. And so you'll see that there's like, you know, Docker volume creates and stuff like that as part of this build image and stuff like that, so that you're actually not, you know, to make these builds faster, which is actually pretty cool to see that Tilt actually is able to do that, because this is like total pain in the butt to be able to do this stuff. So very cool. All right, and then, yeah, this one also, as we build it, it also has a React client using Webpack on the front end in Babel. So, yeah, that'd definitely be an interesting thing to try and see how that would work with Tilt. All right, cool. Yeah, so feedback, I mean, just like I think we're running down the clock here. I think this is really great. It's a great developer experience. The one thing that concerns me here is I'm not quite sure how I create I mean, this very much feels like it's a tool that's built for a developer experience. I think understanding how this relates to a production build pipeline, right? Like if I have, you know, a CI system, and right now it's like I can't build this front end image for a production build without using Tilt, because it turns out that we're moving stuff out of the Docker file, which is sort of like this defined thing, into some of this Python stuff for how we actually do the fast build. And so understanding like, how do I build this for a production runtime where Tilt's not injecting the sidecar, where I can build the artifacts, I can deploy the artifacts. I do that in a way where I have confidence that it's actually sort of a production deploy workflow versus a deploy workflow. That I think is the biggest question in my mind. But I think there's a lot to like here. It's certainly very, very cool. And Olav's asking, are we complementing a new edition of Kubernetes up and running? Yeah, so Brendan and Kelsey and I are working on that. Slow progress. This is, I'm trying to find time to do that and all the work to integrate Heptio with VMware, but it's kind of my weekend project right now. All right, anybody else have any last comments before we sign off? I mean, first of all, thank you, Dan, and all the folks from Windmill for joining us and helping to explore the project. It's really, really cool. It's really, really cool. Sorry, I was looking for the right thing there. And I love that there's so much innovation in terms of how to make Kubernetes easier to use, easier to approach, easier to develop against. I think between, something like Scaffold and Helm and Tilt and what is the other one? Not Brigade, but the other sort of Microsoft. There's a lot of great ideas here. There's other things like telepresence that help to bridge the network across these things. So there's a really sort of fertile set of tools here, and I love seeing Tilt be a part of this. And I love to see a team, actively listening, engaging, trying to move this stuff forward. So Yemos says, will this work with Minikube? Actually, yes, I think it's probably easier with Minikube. It turns out that I had to go a little bit off script to actually make it work with a real cluster. Draft, yeah, Draft is the thing that I was looking at. So that's definitely part of the orbit. But I think, Tilt is definitely bringing some new ideas, some new tools here. I love the Curses UI here. I think that is really, really cool. So really cool stuff. Thanks for joining me. Next week, I believe Duffy's going to be driving the bus. And Chris is going to be out for a couple of weeks. She's been traveling and has some other stuff coming up. So we're going to be switching off. There might be a gap there, but I'm trying to make sure I set aside time so that I can do more TGIKs. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And see you next week.